Be sure to subscribe for more content. What is up, ladies and gents? Welcome to the BigBC Finance Channel, and I hope you're having a very lovely day today. So in today's video, we're going to be talking all about Luna, what has happened to it recently, and where we think the price is going to go to in the future, as well as why this bit of information is actually pretty bullish for Luna Classic. So be sure to stay tuned for all of that. And of course, if you appreciate the daily analysis on this channel and you're one of the 86% of people that watch my videos that have not yet subscribed, be sure to hit the subscribe button if you like this content. So without further ado, let's get the annotations back on the screen, and let's first talk about what has happened to Luna Classic recently, and then we'll move on to the price predictions. So recently we've seen Luna Classic go from some sort of downtrend here in the price, as been dictated by this resistance here. This resistance has been in purple and has been in place since the start of December, and we finally saw prices break through this resistance, a 12% pump over the course of Thursday, and bringing the prices up to 17.8 cents before consolidating in this area. Now, a pump like this normally isn't too significant, but of course the reason behind it is actually very interesting, and if you are a long-term investor here in Luna Classic, then it's very important to know. So I'm not going to go into too much detail in this video about it, but as a summary, what has potentially come to light is the fact that SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, might be behind the crash of Luna. And of course, if this is the case, then it would put this whole story full circle, because we knew that someone shorted UST in huge amounts, thereby driving the price down of Luna and then crashing it from $100 all the way to 1/100th of a cent. And we didn't know who that was, but now there are leads that it could be Sam. And of course, there is an inquiry going on at the moment about market manipulation. And if it's found to be true, then this should clear Do Kwon's name from a bad actor here in crypto. So very big news, something that we're going to be following. At the moment, it is just inquiry. It's in its early phases, so that's why we didn't see a massive pump here. But if it's found out to be true, Sam was behind the Luna crash, then we should see a huge pump. I'm talking many times the size of this kind of pump here. So very exciting in that sense, and that's the first thing I wanted to talk about, because now I'm going to be completely keeping my eye on this inquiry going forward. So those are kind of my first thoughts here. Just also talking about Luna Classic in the shorter term as well. It looks like we have consolidated in a pattern like this, and I think the next play here for Luna Classic is something like this. So basically we have this resistance now. We've crossed this first one going down in the steep direction, and we've seen this a lot of times here on Luna Classic. This has been quite an easy tradable pattern, because every time we get a steep resistance going down like this, we always have seen some sort of breakout here on Luna Classic. I can show you plenty of times in the past where this has been the case. So if I show you this, for example, the FTX crash here on Luna Classic, we've seen this really steep kind of resistance going down here on the Luna Classic price, and indeed after we break through this resistance, we saw this nice pump come out of it. And of course, not the biggest pump whatsoever, but nonetheless, if you are a trader, then that's still 13% in the upwards direction in just a few hours after this long-term resistance was broken. Another example in the past year, it was this one. So again, we had this resistance coming down where the price came to touch this kind of level on multiple occasions. And of course, after this resistance was broken, we did have to be a little bit more patient, but then we did see the price go up to around 2.7 cents here. So if we just get our measuring tool once again, a couple of days, and we would have seen an 18% trade. So it's always good to watch these longer term resistances, because of course they do end up giving us a decent trade here. So one of the major things I'm looking out for at the moment is if this resistance is actually respected, because of course with chart patterns, they're never perfect. So what we could actually see is prices just move sideways like this, and then obviously we'll have to recalibrate our trend lines according to the new price data. So what I'll really look out for over the next coming hours and days here on Luna Classic is how the price reacts to this trend line. If it does something like this, that's very promising, because then we get more tests of this trend line going down. And the more tests there are of a trend line, the more reliable it is. So of course, if we do see prices start to break out of this trend line, then that is where we would enter this trade and would ride the prices up as long as the momentum is going in the upwards direction. So that's what I'm looking at the shorter term at the moment. Of course, everything here on Luna Classic kind of hangs in the balance as well, because of what the whole cryptocurrency market is doing. And of course, and if we have a look at the main cryptocurrency, which is Bitcoin, Bitcoin basically dictates the tune of the whole cryptocurrency market. So if we see a major move here on Bitcoin, a change of trend, for example, from bearish to bullish, or we just see a huge pump or a huge dump, then we should see that reflected here in Luna Classic as well. So, if Bitcoin were to make a move up to say 20,000 over the course of the next several days, then it would be a lot easier for Luna Classic to also head in an upwards direction. But if we see Bitcoin break down to 15,000, for example, then it makes the bearish alternative a lot more viable here on Luna Classic. It's going to be harder for us to be bullish on Luna Classic whilst Bitcoin is heading downwards. So this is why it's really important to pay attention to what Bitcoin is doing. And I've been analyzing what Bitcoin has been doing because of that, because basically it affects pretty much every single altcoin that you invest in. So, and I do think Bitcoin is in a critical area at the moment, because as you can see here, it's been kind of consolidating in this sideways pattern for the past month. And looking at its features, we can see that the price here has been very, very tame, because it is a consolidation when we compare it to this drop that we had after the FTX fallout. Now, and there are several chart patterns that I have found coming from this price action here on Bitcoin. So the first one that you guys probably have seen if you see my previous videos is this thing that I've seen here on Bitcoin. This here is some sort of bear flag pattern, and the bear flag pattern is what I initially saw on Bitcoin and what I thought was going to happen. So a bear flag just basically consists of a large price decline, which is this flagpole here, where we saw prices drop from 20,000 all the way down to 16,000 on Bitcoin, and we've seen this month-long consolidation pattern which forms the flag. Now, for this pattern to complete, we need to see prices head down first to 16,100, and only if then we get to 16,100 and prices continue to fall with a lot of momentum and volume below 16,100, which is where the support line is for Bitcoin, then we should see prices head down fairly steeply to the ultimate price target there of 13,200. And so this is one of the patterns that I've seen on Bitcoin. And of course, if this were to happen where Bitcoin got down to 13,200, then I expected here on Luna Classic for the prices to head at least down to 13.6 cents. And if that does happen, I will be placing a buy order at this 13.6 cents level, with the premise that if we do see prices get down to this level very steeply, then I'd expect quite a big bounce up in the upwards direction. So just for comparison to this level, for example, we can see that prices touch this level as well, 13.6 cents, back at the FTX fallout here on Luna Classic on the 8th of November. And what we saw here on Luna Classic, after the prices touched this 13.6 cents, price shot straight back up within the same candle. So basically within the same hour, we saw prices go back up 30% from this 13.6 cents level on Luna. And so if we had a buy order at this region here, we could have literally made a 30% trade in the space of an hour. And if we were a little bit more patient as well, so if we held for the space of several days, the ultimate top there was at around 73% when the prices briefly went up to around 23.4 cents before coming back down. So that's the kind of magnitude of trade that we could be looking at if prices do plunge down quite steeply to this level. And therefore I want to be placing that buy order with the expectation that prices are going to bounce quite steeply in a very short time frame. And of course that would be a very handsome trade for any trader to make. Of course, we also want to place a small stop loss just underneath it, just in case this level doesn't hold and prices continue to plunge. And if that does happen, this will be my next anticipated price level. Again, same premise applies with 11.6 cents in my opinion here on Luna Classic, with the fact that if we get down to this level, there should be a sharp bounce here on Luna Classic. So those are the two trades I'm looking to make. Also with this purple line, this is a very significant level here on Luna Classic. This is its lifetime support. So if I just show you briefly on the 1-day chart, this is another level that's got a lot of significance on Luna Classic, so it could make a very nice trade as well. So if prices were to get down to this level, I'd be potentially placing a buy order. But if Bitcoin does head down to 13,200, I do think this level is going to get penetrated quite quickly in my opinion. So the main levels that I'd be looking at if Bitcoin got down to 13,200 are these two levels, 11.6 cents and 13.6 cents. Now, where I've kind of changed my stance from my previous videos is kind of deciphering what this pattern is on Bitcoin. So we do know that something bearish is going to happen in the near future, but we don't know how bearish it's going to be. And more recently, I've seen something a little bit more like this come into play. So on Bitcoin at the moment, if I go on the 1-hour chart here, basically what we can see is some sort of rising wedge. Now a rising wedge is another bearish chart pattern, but the difference is if we do see this rising wedge, we should see a much less bearish price target. If prices were to break down over the course of this weekend, for example, we should see a price target on Bitcoin of around 15,400, which, you know, would be the bottom of the Bitcoin price back on the 21st of November as well. So if we do see this rising wedge play out and we see prices plunge below this purple support here with an increase in volume and momentum, then prices should ultimately head down to this region here. But that is a lot less bearish than 13,200. And so if this is the case, if we do see this rising wedge, and we'll know when we've seen it because we should see an increase in volume, we should see large red candles looking like this, taking the price below this rising wedge, then we should see 15,400. And on Luna Classic here, I have a lot more hope that this purple line will hold. And so it's really important to note, it's really important to see what pattern we're seeing here on Bitcoin right now. Again, if I just zoom out and show you on the 1-day chart, it looks very similar to the kind of pattern that we saw back over here on Bitcoin, which was also some sort of rising wedge. We saw prices do something like this on Bitcoin back in August, and eventually, as you can see here, we saw a complete breakdown of, and as you can see, the prices jetted down below this rising wedge with a lot of momentum and a lot of volume as prices started to plunge lower. So we've seen a rising wedge before here on Bitcoin, and it looks like if we do see that rising wedge, the bottom for Bitcoin could be in at 15,400, 15,300 in that region before we start to move sideways and start to recover in 2023. And so the difficult thing is, if we get down to 15,300 as a result of this rising wedge, how do we know if we've seen a bear flag as well? Because of course, if you remember what I said about the bear flag, if we get down to 16,100 and prices continue to plunge lower, then we could be seeing this bear flag in play. But of course, that would be the price target from the rising wedge. So what we want to see is, if the prices get to 16,100 after breaking down from this rising wedge, does it start to pick up in volume? Does it start to pick up in momentum as prices plunge below the 16,100 level as a result of this rising wedge? And if the answer is yes, then we could see prices plunge below 15,400. But if we start to run out of volume, if we start to run out of momentum after prices go below 16,100, then that could be a sign that the bear flag is not going to be in play, and we're just seeing the result of this rising wedge here. So pretty fascinating stuff, and it's really going to determine where Luna Classic gets to. So in my opinion, if we do go to 15,400 on Bitcoin, depending on the kind of momentum it has, I would expect to see some good support at this purple support here. If that doesn't hold, then I'd expect 13.6 cents at this pink line here to be the bottom of Luna Classic as Bitcoin heads to 15,400. But if Bitcoin heads lower down to 13,200 as a result from the bear flag, then I'd expect prices to at least get to this 13.6 cent level. And if that doesn't hold, then I'd expect 11.6 cents. But if Bitcoin bottoms out at 15,400, I wouldn't expect Luna Classic to go this low. And so what we're really talking about here on Luna Classic is, when Bitcoin starts to bottom out, I do think we're going to see some sort of drop here. If it is this pink line, this pink support on Luna Classic, then it's about a 21% drop from here. If we do see 11.6 cents as Bitcoin heads to 13,200, maybe 32% drop here on Luna Classic. But the good news is, I do think that would be the bottom. So even if it does get down to these levels, it just presents an opportunity for a longer term investor to accumulate as prices go up in the future. So that's my thoughts here at the moment. Finally, and just as important as looking at what Bitcoin does, we also want to look at what the stock market does, because the stock market and cryptocurrencies have been fairly correlated in their activities. So for example, if I show you this back in August on the stock market, we saw the S&P from June to August go from 3,600 to 4,300, and in exactly the same time frame, we've seen Bitcoin go from this level here at around 18,000 to 25,000. So we've seen correlation between the stock market and cryptocurrencies, particularly since the economy is bad. They are both risky assets that investors tend to stay away from, so they behave very similarly in these economic times. And of course, on the stock market at the moment, what I do believe has happened is that we've completed some sort of bear market rally. You can see prices have gone up just like they went up from June to August there. We've touched this kind of resistance here on the stock market, and as you can see, this resistance here is connecting the peaks of the bear market rallies of 2022 on the stock market. So price perfectly came up to touch this resistance, and now it has bounced off and started heading in a downwards direction. And of course, at the moment, everything seems to point for the prices to continue to head lower on the stock market. What I do think we are seeing right now is some sort of rising wedge as well. So we can connect the bottoms and the tops of the price on the stock market, and we can see some sort of rising wedge, very similar to the rising wedge that I've pointed out on Bitcoin here. So if this does come into play, we should see a price target of 3,680 on the stock market. And if that does happen, then we're going to see a bearish bias here on Bitcoin as well. So that's another reason to support the fact that we're going to be seeing some bearish price move in the near future on Bitcoin. But whether it gets down to 15,400 or whether it gets down to 13,200 will just be a matter of what the volume, what the momentum does as prices approach the $16,000 level here on Bitcoin. And of course, that's going to determine where Luna Classic will probably find its bottom. So the most optimistic case, in my opinion, is this purple support. That's if Bitcoin has a very soft landing with very little volume, very little momentum. And the most conservative estimate that I have for Luna Classic is around this 11.6 cents level down here, this gray resistance that should have a lot of buyer support if Bitcoin heads down to 13,200. So those are my thoughts here on Luna Classic. That's pretty much all I have to say in this video. Hopefully this video is clear. If there is any questions that you do have, feel free to comment them down below. But otherwise, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you did find this helpful and you haven't done so already, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more content like this. And otherwise, I'll see you in my next video.